We are taught about Roman law, Roman discipline, Roman architecture. We are told that Rome brought order to chaos, civilization to barbarians, structure to a fractured world. The aqueducts still stand. The arches still cast shadows. Latin still echoes through legal systems. A political vocabulary, but beneath that marble surface was something colder. Rome did not rise on genius alone. It rose on fear. And fear, when organized, becomes policy. This is not a story about random cruelty. It is not about a few violent generals losing control in the heat of battle. What built Rome was something far more deliberate, systematic, documented, legal. The empire that called itself the bringer of peace perfected methods of destruction so efficient that resistance itself became irrational. To understand Rome honestly, we have to look at what it did when it wanted to make an example of someone. Because Rome rarely punished quietly, it performed. In 71 BCE, a rebellion led by a former gladiator named Spartacus shook the Roman Republic. For 2 years, thousands of enslaved men fought Roman legions across the Italian peninsula. They were not an organized nation. They had no formal supply lines, no established capital. They were desperate men who wanted freedom. Rome eventually crushed them. Victory, however, was not enough. The surviving rebels were not simply executed. They were crucified, thousands of them, and they were placed along a major road leading toward Rome, stretching mile after mile. It was not just an execution, it was theater. Crucifixion was slow. It was designed to prolong suffering, but more importantly, it was designed to be seen. Rome understood psychology. A single execution hidden in a courtyard inspires sympathy. Thousands displayed publicly inspire obedience. Travelers entering the city would walk past the spectacle for hours. Families, merchants, children, every passerby received the same silent lesson. This is what defiance costs. The purpose was not revenge. It was deterrence. After that display, large-scale slave uprisings inside Italy became rare for generations. The lesson had settled into the collective mind. Rome did not merely defeat its enemies. It shaped memory. This pattern repeated across the empire. In Judea, in Gaul, in regions that resisted taxation or occupation. Crucifixion became a tool of governance. It was a visual language. Rome did not need to explain its authority. In philosophical terms, the crosses did the explaining, and it worked because Rome was consistent. Cruelty, when unpredictable, creates chaos. Cruelty, when predictable and legalized, creates order. The Roman state integrated violence into its legal system. Military commanders had clear authority to punish rebellion with severity. The spectacle of punishment was often considered necessary for maintaining stability across vast territories, and this is where Rome becomes unsettling. It did not see these actions as moral failures. It saw them as administrative solutions. There were cities Rome decided should not simply be conquered. They should disappear. One of the most famous examples was Carthage. For over a century, Carthage had rivaled Rome across the Mediterranean. They fought wars that reshaped the ancient world. By the time the final conflict arrived in the mid-2nd century BCE, Carthage was no longer the dominant military power it once had been. But Rome remembered. The war ended with Rome victorious, and instead of merely installing governors or demanding tribute, Rome destroyed the city entirely. Buildings were dismantled. The population was sold into slavery. The physical structure of the city was erased. This was not impulsive rage. It was policy reinforced by years of political rhetoric inside the Roman Senate. Certain leaders argued repeatedly that Carthage's very existence was a future threat, and so Rome made a decision that would echo for centuries. It chose annihilation over coexistence. The message extended far, beyond North Africa. Rival Rome, and you may vanish from history. The psychological effect of such actions cannot be overstated. When one city disappears, neighboring regions calculate their options carefully. Submission begins to look safer than pride. Then there was Gaul. When Julius Caesar launched his campaigns north of Italy, he justified them as defensive measures. But what followed over nearly a decade was an expansion that brought millions under Roman control. Ancient sources, including Caesar's own writings, describe sieges, massacres, enslavements. Entire tribes subdued, populations displaced. War in the ancient world was brutal everywhere, not only in Rome, but Rome distinguished itself through scale and organization. It recorded outcomes, it counted captives, it formalized the spoils. Tens of thousands could be killed in a single campaign. Others were transported and sold in slave markets across the Mediterranean and in Rome. Caesar was celebrated, triumphs were paraded, festivals declared, the Republic rewarded success, not restraint. To Rome, expansion meant security, more territory meant more resources meant stronger legions. Stronger legions meant fewer threats, and if that expansion required devastation, it was considered unfortunate but necessary. That word, necessary, appears often in discussions of empire. It is the word that allows cruelty to feel justified. One of Rome's most effective tools was not immediate violence, but patience. Siege warfare was common in the ancient world. Cities had walls, armies had to breach them. Assaults were costly, casualties high. Rome learned that starvation was often more efficient. Instead of storming fortified cities and losing soldiers, Roman commanders sometimes chose to surround them. Supply lines were cut, trade halted, crops burned. Then they waited inside the walls. Time became the enemy, food dwindled, disease spread, social order broke down, the strong consumed, war remained, the weak suffered first. Eventually, surrender came, or collapse from a military perspective. This method minimized Roman losses. It conserved manpower. It broke resistance without expensive frontal assaults. From a human perspective, it meant prolonged agony for civilians trapped inside. Ancient historians describe sieges where famine led to desperate acts. These accounts are not comfortable to read. They are not meant to be.